At the beginning, we see a man taking his own life. Then we meet Dean Corso, a rare book dealer from New York City. He is somewhat of a swindler but an excellent investigator when it comes to books, their peculiarities, and more. One day, he is hired by the wealthy collector Boris Balkan. Balkan had acquired a famous 17th century book called The Nine Gates of the Kingdom of Shadows. According to legend, Lucifer wrote a book known as Dilo Melanican. In the 17th century, Aristide Torcia made a copy of this book. In collaboration with the devil, the man created this malevolent work. In the illustrations of the work, there were riddles, which if solved, would grant the book's bearer the power to summon the King of Darkness. Torcia was executed for his blasphemous act, and his books were burned, with only 3 copies surviving. One of them was the one Balkan acquired. Another was in France and the last in Portugal. The wealthy man was willing to pay Dean Corso a substantial amount of money to investigate the other 2 copies. Balkan wanted to find out if his copy was genuine and if the others were as well. Corso asserts that Balkan's copy seems quite authentic. In any case, driven by greed, he accepts the job. From there, he would embark on a journey of pain and mystery that he had never imagined. The protagonist keeps Balkan's book with him, as he would need it to compare with the other copies. To start his work, Dean Corso visits Liana Telfer, the wife of the man we saw take his own life at the beginning of the film. Turns out that shortly before dying, the man sold his book to Boris Balkan. The woman says this was strange because that item was one of her husband's most valued possessions in his book collection. Regardless, Liana tells Dean that the book was acquired from a bookstore in Spain. Some time later, when he was in the library, the protagonist sees a mysterious woman. Strangely enough, it wasn't the first time he had seen her. Upon returning home, Corso finds his residence ransacked. Realizing it wouldn't be safe to leave the book there, he decided to lend it to his friend Bernie. Some time later, Corso is visited by Liana. She says she wanted to buy back the book her deceased husband sold. Dean couldn't sell it because it wasn't his. In the end, the woman tries to bribe him in every way, including becoming very intimate with him. Still, when she realizes he wouldn't give her the book under any circumstances, Liana decides to attack him. During the scuffle, Corso is hit on the head and ends up unconscious. Upon waking up, the protagonist decides to return to Bernie's house. But there, he finds his friend dead. Luckily, the book was well hidden, and whoever killed Bernie couldn't find it. After retrieving the book, Corso calls Balkan. He explains what happened, stating he wouldn't continue the job because it had become too dangerous. The wealthy man, in turn, just offers more money to the protagonist. In the end, Dean continues with the job. But I find it curious that he didn't even think to call the police to report the murder he witnessed. Like, screw the friend. Dean arrives at the store where Andrew Telfer, Liana's deceased husband, bought the mysterious book. The bookstore owners were twin brothers who specialized in old books. The protagonist asks if they thought the copy was authentic, and they say that during the time they had the book, they never found any indications that it wasn't. But when Dean asks about Andrew buying the book, he receives a surprising answer from the brothers. They say the man hadn't shown much interest in the book. In fact, the one who became obsessed with the work was Liana, who asked Andrew to buy it. Additionally, another important fact those eccentric individuals point out is that the book's illustrations were made by someone or something in collaboration with Aristide Torcia. There were 9 illustrations in the book. 6 were signed by Torcia, and the other 3 were signed as LCF. Corso deduces that LCF stands for Lucifer, but it was absurd to think so. The whole thing was just a silly legend. Or was it? Did Torcia indeed work in partnership with the devil in creating this book? Later, on the train, Dean encounters the mysterious woman from before. He starts to think she works for Boris Balkan, having been sent to keep an eye on him. Finally, our hero meets Mr. Fargas, who held another copy of the 9 Gates of the Kingdom of Shadows. With the man's approval, Dean examines that copy and compares it with his own. Indeed, Mr. Fargas's book seems as authentic as Boris Balkan's. Everything was perfectly identical except for some small details. Corso notices that the illustrations have subtle differences. So, For instance, if in Balkan's book, illustration 2 was signed by Aristides Torsia. In contrast, Fargas's copy had illustration 2 signed by LCF. Additionally, there were small differences in the drawings, as if there was a riddle to be solved within those illustrations. When he finally leaves Fargas's house, the protagonist is almost run over by a man with silver hair. Right after, the green-eyed woman appears again and seems to chase the man who attacked the protagonist on a motorcycle. Shortly after, Dean reports his findings to Balkan over the phone. Boris asks the protagonist to obtain Fargas's copy, but Dean knew the man wouldn't want to sell it at all. The next day, the mysterious woman appears to talk to Corso. She says he should talk to Fargas again. He doesn't understand anything, but nevertheless joins her and goes to the man's house. Upon arriving there, Dean discovers that Fargas had been killed, drowned. His copy had been badly burned, but there was still something left of the book, and he decides to take it with him. He realizes that the green-eyed woman knew a lot, but despite asking her many questions, she refuses to answer them. She only says they need to catch a flight to Paris to talk to Baroness Kessler, who holds the third copy. During the flight, the most that woman tells Corso about her role in all this is that she was there to protect him. She was a kind of guardian angel. The protagonist talks to the Baroness and discovers through her about the existence of a secret order created to worship the book. It becomes clear that Liana Telfer was part of this secret order, and when her husband found out, he decided to take his own life. The Order of the Silver Serpent was made up of wealthy and famous people who worshipped the devil, reading the Book of the Nine Gates every year as a ritual. They believed that the financial success they achieved was due to participating in this order. Moreover, during the ceremonies, orgies and all kinds of madness occurred. Eventually, Corso gets to analyze Kessler's book, but when the Baroness realizes Corso works for Balkan, she refuses to cooperate with him. It is clear she didn't like Boris at all. At night, Corso is attacked by the same silver-haired man from before. But, once again, the mysterious woman appears to save him. She appears flying, which is really out of place. And it never becomes clear what exactly this character is. Like, is she really an angel, a demon? Is she good? Evil? Anyway, Corso ends up being saved by his faithful sidekick. Still, after going through all this, he continues the case. He also didn't call the police. The guy is really determined. Oh, something important to mention is that the 03 illustrations marked as LCF in Fargas's book were taken by the mysterious killer. Dean makes copies of the illustrations in his book. Then he hides the work in his hotel room and goes to talk to the Baroness again. She didn't want to receive him, but after he explains that the illustrations were different in each book and that this could be an indication of a bigger puzzle, Kessler becomes curious and lets the investigator examine her copy. First of all, Dean finds that this copy is authentic, just like the other two. Therefore, there were no forgeries, contrary to what Boris had thought. He notices that the illustrations are also different. But the most curious thing is the following. Each book has subtle differences in only 03 illustrations. Thus, all 03 volumes contain 09 enigmatic illustrations. Considering that the name of the book is The Nine Gates of the Kingdom of Shadows, this seemed more than just a coincidence. Dean ends up being attacked while doing his research and falls unconscious. Upon waking up, he finds the Baroness dead and her collection of books in flames. The 3 illustrations from the book he had in his hands were also taken. He, of course, once again did not inform the police. After all, why would he? I'm involved in a sinister mystery amidst a web of murders. But screw it, I'll handle everything on my own. When Corso returns to the hotel, he realizes that the copy he had hidden has simply disappeared. He ends up discovering that Liana Telfer stole his copy, which leads him and the mysterious woman to the thief's mansion, where the annual meeting of the secret order would take place. When he arrives at the location, Corso finds his book but is surprised by Liana and her henchman, who was the silver-haired man. While our hero and his companion are being escorted by the villain, Mrs. Telfer begins the meeting. We see several cultists around her. Liana reads the book in devotion, believing that the work, as a conduit of the devil's forces, granted power and wealth to her and the other cultists. Dean manages to take down the silver-haired henchman and uses his clothes to disguise himself as a member of the cult. He infiltrates among the others, and while the ritual is happening, suddenly Boris Balkan appears. He came there to reclaim the book that belonged to him. He mocks Liana and her followers for believing that the King of Darkness paid them any attention. Boris boasts of having solved the book's riddle, which made him capable of summoning Lucifer. Right after, he attacks Liana and kills her. The other cultists flee like cockroaches. Boris, having his book in hand, escapes from there. Dean decides to go after his employer, but this time alone, as he thought the mysterious woman was working for Boris. Eventually, he finds the place where Balkan had gone. It was a castle in the middle of nowhere. There, the protagonist sees his employer about to begin the ritual. Balkan had in his possession the new illustrations and had solved the riddle. He tells Dean to witness him summoning the King of Darkness. The man sets fire around himself and boasts about how the flames do not hurt him, which in his perception showed the success of the ritual. However, the flames actually start to burn him. Suddenly, Boris screams in despair as he is consumed by the fire. Dean takes the illustrations and leaves the place, watching from a distance as the flames rise impressively from the castle. When he gets into his car, he is suddenly surprised by the presence of the mysterious woman. She kisses him, and then the two engage intimately in the open air, while the flames light up the night. The next day, Dean Corso asks the woman why the ritual didn't work. She tells him that the 9th illustration had been forged. Soon after, the two stop at a gas station. Suddenly, the mysterious woman disappears, but there was something on the protagonist's car windshield. It is a paper where you can read, Sinisa Brothers. In the illustration, you see the image of a woman very similar to the mysterious woman, riding a dragon with several heads. Our hero goes to the Sinisa Brothers store, who are the twins we saw before. But there, he discovers that the brothers had disappeared. There were some workers taking away the few remaining pieces of furniture. When they move a bookshelf, a paper floats in Corso's direction. He takes it in his hands, noticing that it is the new illustration, where the woman on the dragon appears. What catches his attention is that in the castle behind her, a blinding light can be seen. Dean returns to the castle, and the doors open for him, revealing a splendid light. Well, it's clear that he completed the ritual. Now, did this open the gates of the Kingdom of Shadows for him? Does the light symbolize that Dean achieved knowledge, enlightenment? This is left more to the audience's interpretation, just like the role of the mysterious woman in all of this. In my view, she realized from the beginning that Dean was the one with the most potential to complete the ritual and decided to help him achieve this goal. The woman would be an angelic and demonic being tasked with protecting the protagonist. I would say she is a demonic creature because she exhibits supernatural powers. Besides, her eyes acquire a shimmering green color, and in the end, there's that whole moment of lust in the castle between her and Dean. But, as I said, there's a lot of interpretation in this story. That's it for this video. See you in the next one and goodbye.